Hello appraisers, this is Brandon with Spark for Appraisers and True Footage, and in this video I'm going to attempt to give you everything you need to know to use Synapse both confidently and accurately. Now in doing so I may have some jump cuts, my voice may change a little bit or the screen may change as I move into a different topic. Normally I try to do these all in one sitting here in one session and don't do much editing, but I probably will do that for this video just to make sure I squeeze in everything I can in under 60 minutes. One other note before I get started is that I may reference on occasion different videos that I already have out there, and I will link to those in both the video description below, and I may also have a link up in the top corner of the screen as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. All right, what you're looking at now is the main Synapse home screen. And by the way, the URL, the website to actually get to where I am right now is synapse.spark4appraisers.com, which I will put on the screen here. And essentially, when you first get here, you just got to give us a little bit of information, and we will ask you if you want to save this for the future. So you tell us what state you're in, what MLS, what property type this particular session is for, SFR, condo, manufactured home, or multifamily. And then you can also choose from a template. Now, if you don't already have a template, it will prompt you and let you know that you can just use the standard template, which is the default. And then from there, you can tweak it and make them your own. Also, I am going to try not to get too deep into details and settings. I just want to give you an overview, and we will have other videos that get really deep into it that I will link to. All right, and it's important here, I'm going to go ahead and choose that template, that you choose the correct effective date. This is the effective date of the appraisal that you're doing this for, and then you can name the session. A lot of people name it the address, the file number, just whatever you want to name it. I'm just going to call this, let's just call it demo actually, and I will start a session. By the way, you can also click here to use an existing session. So I can click into this and I can go look for other sessions I may have done recently, and I can load those up. I can make copies of those, or I can delete them. And of course, if you have a lot of sessions, then you can also search through them to make it a little bit quicker and easier there. All right, so let's go ahead and start our session. And what that does is it takes us to the screen where you load in your data. We call it the Get Data screen. Now you can see these are the data sets for demo, which is what I named this, but this is, I could again have named it anything. If I wanted to name it 123 East Main Street, I can do that. And that's our data sets for this session here. Now, I have pre-named my data sets to competing, neighborhood data, and alternative. But the default here, when you first go to use Synapse, is it will say dataset 1, dataset 2, dataset 3. You can name them whatever you want. Now, as far as what data you actually want to load in, I would definitely encourage you, absolutely no matter what, load in your competing properties. Now, what do I mean by competing properties? What I'm talking about are properties that you, the appraiser, the expert, have determined are competing with the property that you are appraising. So those are the competing properties. Absolutely load that in, and I would encourage you to make that the very first data set you load in. That's why I named it this, but again, you don't have to. You can do it different if you'd like to, but I would encourage you, no matter what, to definitely include the competing properties as one of the data sets. Second, I would really encourage you to include the neighborhood data set. Now, I know a lot of you may bristle at that and you may think, why would I include all the properties in the neighborhood? They may be totally different and not really indicative of what an adjustment might be for my particular sub-market in that area. And I get that. I don't disagree with that. However, there are things that I'm going to show you, like our modeling feature, that basically tease out different things, assuming you are accurate regarding, let's say, your GLA adjustment or your lot size adjustment, if there is one. It's possible to tease those features out and just have what's remaining. And you can actually get good results with that, even on your neighborhood set of data. And then for your third data set, there, I don't have anything in particular. What some people like to do is if you're in a rural area, maybe you can get the whole town and it wouldn't be that many properties. Then I would encourage you to use a competing submarket. So basically competing properties, properties that would compete with your subject property, but maybe in the next town over if you're in a rural area, or just something where you can feel confident these are properties that would compete with my subject property, except maybe locationally they're further away. Because that's the way I would do it. Alternative, I don't really use very often, but you may be in an area where it's helpful to grab that. Now, the one last thing regarding getting data is how far back do you want to go? I would encourage you to get a bare minimum, like an absolute bare minimum of 50 competing properties. That's 50 competing properties. In Synapse, you can go back further in time. In fact, you can go back as far in time as you need to get more data. And more data is typically better, especially when it comes to the competing properties. We want more of those properties, or as many as we can get that are similar to your subject property, because that's going to help really with the number crunching that's going on to get accurate results for the adjustments. Now, I will say there is a hard cutoff on the number of properties you can have in a data set at 5,000. Now, 5,000 is a lot, and I'm not saying you need to go that high, but I am saying you could go back 3 or 4 years in time and get maybe 200 competing properties, let's say. I'm just making up numbers here, but if you went back 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and that gets you to 300 or 400 properties, that would be great. That's much better than using 50. So going back further in time is fine. I'm going to show you in the next section how Synapse will help you account for changes in market conditions or time adjustments. So it's okay to get a property that's 3 years old because we're going to be able to account for changes in time or market conditions. Okay, so basically the only hard and fast rule is definitely get competing properties in there. The other is at least get 50 properties in there. Now, I'm not saying you can't get good results with fewer properties. Like in theory, you could load in 15 and maybe get good results. I think that'd be ultra, ultra rare and very unlikely. But I'm just telling you, for the sake of using Synapse, I would get minimum of 50 and absolutely, if at all possible, go back further in time and change that 50 up to 2, 3, 400. And then neighborhood data, you can go up higher. I will say that Synapse does get a little bit slower when you get up into the 1,500 property range. So maybe try and keep it under 1,000, but it absolutely will work with up to 5,000 properties. Just going to be a little bit slower at the number crunching part. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to load in some data. So you can do one of two things. You can either drag and drop a file right onto these cards, or you can click the cloud, which I'll do, and I can go find a download that I want. This is the one I just downloaded recently. I'm going to load that data in. Now let's see how many data points are in this set that I uploaded. We got 212 properties, low sale price, high sale price. That is a pretty big range. Maybe I should have um, done some more narrowing down, but that's all right. And then we have the average selling price, and then you have the oldest date and the newest date. And you can see I went back right around 4 years. Now I am going to upload the neighborhood set of data, and this is a bigger file, and you'll see that this one will take a little bit longer to get all that data loaded in there. I think this is between somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 properties, I believe. Let's check it out. Yeah, 1,200 properties. This one I only went back 3 years, and that's because I also had a much bigger, set of data to work with because I wasn't just using those smaller range of properties that I deemed were competing. All right, so we got our two sets of data. Now let's go ahead and before I hit done, I want to show you something regarding transactional adjustments. And I think this is really important here. In fact, I know it's really important. What I would encourage you to do is click right here where it says transactional adjustment settings. And don't worry, you can do this later. So if you already hit done and you moved on to the next screen, you can come back to this screen and tweak it. But essentially what's going on here is I just want to focus on the bottom part for now, these two charts. What Synapse is doing is it's plotting out all those sales and it's showing you how it's going to make time adjustments essentially or market conditions adjustments. So this black trend line is showing you how it's going to adjust the properties. So you imagine that on the very right side here, if I drew a vertical line at the very right, that is my effective date. And so what Synapse is going to do is, let's say this sale right here, let's say that sale is the one we're talking about, and it's going to make a time adjustment. What it's going to do is it's going to adjust this property based on this trend line to the effective date. So it's going to adjust it up, 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 way up here, and then it's going to adjust it down a little bit to get to here. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to follow this trend line. And so, for example, this property right here that my mouse is on, that one is basically it was stable, and then it dropped a little bit. And so that one will actually have a net downward adjustment, whereas this one over here had a net upward adjustment. So that's the way it'll handle it. And the reason I want you to go here is because can you imagine if, let's say you uploaded data that ended on, let's just say April 1st, but you set your effective date to September 1st. So there's a 5-month gap of no data. This trend line, most likely, if it was left like this, would keep going down and down and down until it got to September. And then by that point, it might be a really negative number for some of these sales when you were to apply that time adjustment. So what I want you to do is come here to this screen, look at this, make sure that the trend line actually looks accurate, especially if you have very little data, like only, let's say, 20 sales. It might be hard for Synapse to determine what the actual trend is. And so I want you to look at this and make sure it looks okay. Now you can change it. So if you look at it and it looks wrong, like let's say it did this, and you know, well, okay, yeah, it was going up, but then it kind of peaked and dropped, then you know, okay, don't use the linear trend line. Let's check out this one. And you can see if that one's good. Or you can move to this one and say, yeah, okay, this one actually does more closely represent my market. And if you don't like any of them, you can turn it off, you can choose none, or you can type in your own adjustment. You can say, you know what, I want to type in my own. I want you to adjust at 1% per month or negative 1% per month, whatever it is that you want to do. So anyways, that's how that works. Let's go ahead and put it back to how it was. One other quick thing while we're here though, property rights, financing terms, conditions of sale, whether it's an REO or short sale, and also seller concessions. These are all things that are also accounted for. Now, Synapse isn't actually on this screen, at least. It's not giving you adjustment information for these. This is just me, and these are the default settings, by the way, telling Synapse that, you know what, I don't want you to account for leasehold properties. If there are leasehold properties in there, those are a different type of property rights, and I don't want to include them because it could mess with the numbers when it comes to adjustments. So this checkbox means that it's removing leasehold properties. When it comes to financing terms, this checkbox means that anything that I have determined is not cash equivalent is going to be removed. And you can define what is cash equivalent over here by clicking Edit Financing List. It will give you every option of every type of financing that your MLS has, and you can choose the ones that you determine are not cash equivalent. You can have it remove REOs and short sales, and you can also have it deduct the seller concessions from the sale price if you'd like to. So anyways, that's that. Let's go ahead and move on. All right, so I click done there. It's recrunching everything, and now I can click done. And then the last step before it actually crunches all the math and I see the result is I come to this screen and I'm going to enter in a little bit of information about my subject property, because Synapse is going to do some things where it can adjust all of the properties I just uploaded to my subject property to help fine tune what the adjustments might be. So I'm just going to type in, let's go with this right here. This is a common one I use for my demos. I'm just going to actually, let's do 1,500 square feet, the 1-story, and I'm doing a pretty basic tract home. I'm going to choose Q4 and the effective age. Now, I can also click this and I can type in a physical depreciation percent instead if I'd like to, or I can just use the straight line method, type in an effective age, and it will do 16 divided by 60, and that's the depreciation amount. I can also tweak what lifespan is by clicking over here. I can change that to whatever I determine the total economic lifespan to be. Okay, and then if I have a basement or a garage, I can check these boxes. I'll check that there's a garage and that it's attached. All right, now I hit done. And now here is where it's actually crunching all of the math. Basically what it's doing, and you'll see the screen here in a moment, is it's running for GLA, let's take as an example, 6 different types of regression. It's running a paired sales analysis. It's running depreciated cost. It's running a group data analysis and a sensitivity analysis. And it also is taking into account if you have any custom adjustments that you want it to do, that can be part of your template. And it's also looking to see what you have done in the past in this same area, and also what your peers have done in the past in this same area. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this. This is what we call the results screen. Up here at the top left, we have our legend. So it's letting you know that these blue dots are based on the competing properties you uploaded. Green dots are the neighborhood. The black dot means it's no data set, like things like depreciated cost or a custom method that you make yourself, like the survey method. Those are not necessarily based on MLS data, so we make those black. Then we have the red dots, which are your prior choices for a quote unquote similar property. And then the purple dots are other appraisers in that same area, their choices for the adjustment on a similar property. And so regarding when something is similar, because we only show these red dots, which is the average and median of your prior choices for a similar property, and the purple dots are the average and median of other appraisers, choices for a similar property. Defining what is similar, you can do right here in this gear icon. It's right here under similar settings. I'm not going to get into the settings themselves, but basically you can control what we consider similar. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and get into what do these dots actually mean? Like, what are you looking at right here? So essentially, each of these dots represents a mathematical calculation, some math that was run on a particular appraisal method. And that method might be ordinary least squares regression. It might be group data or paired sales or sensitivity or depreciated cost. And basically, we run the math on that on all the different data sets using all the different methods. And we are simply presenting those mathematical results up here for you. That's it. And so you may have a whole bunch of dots right here. And then essentially your job as the appraiser is to determine which ones of these am I going to rely on and why? Do I have a good reason to rely on those? So that's what I'm going to kind of help explain in this video here. And then one other thing I want to point out before we get too deep into it is that you'll see that some of these, like half bath right here and full bath, they don't have nearly as many dots. And when I say dots, those are just mathematical results. And why would that be? So why is there no paired sales or regression here for the half bath widget? And also for the full bath, we have a couple, but not nearly as many as we have over here for GLA and lot size, or down here for swimming pool and garage. And that is because the results that came in for regression and paired sales, either it couldn't calculate it because there weren't enough properties or there weren't enough paired sales, or the results were so crazy that Synapse is excluding them. And by the way, you can control what is considered a result that you want to exclude right here in the exclude results setting. So you can go in there and you can say, okay, I want to exclude any bath results that are over X number of dollars or that are over X% of the entire value of the properties that I'm looking at here. So, and that's what I've done. And so right here, I can hover, and I would definitely recommend doing this because this will happen. You're going to use Synapse, and once in a while, you're going to see where you have very few dots to rely on, and you're going to wonder why. Like, did Synapse screw up? What's happening? All you do is you hover over this orange triangle. It will show you what the actual result was and why it was excluded. So in this case, there weren't enough properties to run this particular group data analysis. For true paired sales, there weren't enough pairs. For the neighborhood data, there were enough pairs, but the result was a negative $3,000. And I told Synapse that if my half bath result is a negative number, to exclude it. I also told it if my half bath number is over 10% of the value of the entire property, to exclude it, because that's a ridiculous number. So it excluded these. I think if you remember on the dataset screen, the average sale price was around $350,000. So one half bath, according to this, would be more than 10% of the value of the property. And I know that's not accurate, so I just want it excluded. I don't even want to see it. But again, you can control that. So that's why there's not nearly as many dots showing up here. And you can see there's some real crazy results sometimes, especially from regression that you might get. So that's that. Now, let's get into actually deciphering this. Like, what am I going to do with this information? So the first thing I typically look at is I look at my competing data versus my neighborhood data. A lot of times, the neighborhood data is going to show much higher or much lower numbers than your competing data because we have a big mix of properties in here, and they may be much more valuable or much less valuable for one reason or another. And so that is going to impact these results, especially when it comes to regression. Paired sales, it's not as impactful. You can see the green dots and the blue dots are much closer together. That's because in paired sales, it's like, it's only looking at actual matched pairs. And so a lot of the difference is kind of weaned out of the results. But here in regression, that's not the case. This is simple single variate regression. So it's not able to separate out different features. It assumes that the total difference in value is due to this one particular feature, which is lot size, or due to this one particular feature, which is GLA. So it gives a lot, it thinks there's a lot more value to the GLA there. Okay, so again, what I first do is I'll look at the competing properties and weigh them against the neighborhood. A lot of times I'll immediately think if the green dots are way higher or way lower, I immediately pull those out as outliers. And so what you can see what I'm doing is I'm using this top slider and I'm graying out those results. And that's me telling Synapse that I do not want to place any weight or consideration on these results. They are not reasonable to me, so I don't want to even look at them. And on top of that, I can gray them out, but I can also snip them out. And if I snip them out, basically it's snipping out this entire gray area, so it will zoom in on the non-grayed out areas. So let me show you that. I'll click it. And now these dots are more separated. I can kind of see things better here. Now, I do think there's some outliers over here too. I'm going to get rid of those 3 that are on the very end. And now I kind of have here results between $2 and $5 a square foot. That's still a decent range. It's not great. I would prefer if it was close, they were closer together. But I can see my regression results are here. They're up in the $4 to $5 range, which for this particular property I think is quite high. So I'm probably not going to lean towards that. I do see that other appraisers in the area are choosing right around $4. So maybe that weighs into my decision. But typically, I'm going to place a lot of weight on paired sales, especially when it comes to lot size and GLA, the main 2 that I want to examine first. And typically, that's another thing I want to talk about is what do you want to look at first? Typically, it's the ones where either you have the most confidence because the results are lining up all really nicely, like right in here. I might think, yeah, this is great. Like I have all these results vertically lining up right in this, whatever this is, $70 to $80 range. So I have a lot of confidence in that. Or you may just know that, okay, I know that in this market, paired sales just works great for me. And so I'm going to rely heavily on paired sales. So I will go in here, and typically what I'll do is I'll look at the paired sales. I'm going to lean more on the competing properties, and I will place more of my weight like right here. I do have results that bracket me if I call it right around $3. I may want to start inching my way up to a higher number, but I think I'm going to hold off just because those are based on the neighborhood data, and I just want to place a lot more weight on the competing. So I will slide my bar up here, and this bottom slider is me telling Synapse, this is the result that I want to use. I'm saying that the adjustment, based on my opinion and the data here, my opinion is that the adjustment should be $3 per square foot. And that's my lot size adjustment. Now, as soon as I let go of the slider when I drag it around, it marks it as done over here, and it lights it up green to let me know this one I'm done with, I should move on to the other ones. Now, one other thing I want to show you before I move on and get into a few more details is the commentary. So I can also have commentary built based on the adjustments I've locked in and said are done. So let me show you what that looks like. And to do that, here, let's just click on View Comments. I'm going to show you the comment first. So it says, the lot size adjustment was developed at $3 per square foot. The results, based on all adjustment methods that were calculated and considered relevant, provide an adjustment range from 234 to 483. True paired sales, peer adjustments, and 6 different types of simple regression were the adjustment methods utilized to develop this adjustment. Okay, great. That's all nice. And I can customize this. So if I don't really want the reader of the report, my client, to see the different methods I used, I can turn off that right here with that checkbox. That goes away. I can turn it back on. If I don't want them to see the low and the high, I can turn that off. If I want them to see even more details, I can click here and it gives them more information. It says we actually ran 30 different analyses. 11 of those were the ones that were given weight and consideration, and blah, blah, blah. So basically I can go in here and customize this comment how I want to. I can also click and add an additional comment and just type in whatever I want, my own commentary that I want to have here at the bottom of this comment. And then I can apply all of the settings I chose to all of the other commentary for the other features if I want to do that as well. Now, one thing I want to point out before we move on from commentary is notice this low and high range of what I considered relevant is 234 to 483. Now that directly is based on what I have removed or grayed out. So notice if I change this slider, and let's say I just got rid of it, and so I'm including now, I'm telling Synapse, I'm giving weight and consideration to these other 3 results. Now watch what happens to that comment. And now, instead of saying $2 and something cents, it goes all the way down to 81 cents. So essentially, because now I'm telling Synapse that I'm considering these other results relevant as well. So that's why now that comment changes, because I left those what I might consider as outliers in there. One other thing to talk about that I would consider relevant is you have all these results here, and you might think, well, okay, these are all legitimate mathematical results. Maybe I should just consider all of them. And now I would say to that is the way I think of this is I think of it like I think of my competing properties. So, you know, you do your search in your MLS, you find all the properties that you deem to be competing with your subject property. That's the file that I told you I recommend you upload to Synapse no matter what. And maybe you For the sake of doing the actual appraisal, not talking about Synapse right now, but just let's say doing your market trend analysis, whatever that set of competing data that you have, maybe it's 30 properties, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 20, you have that set of properties. But even though you have all those properties, and think of those as dots on this widget right here, you narrow it down to just the ones that you think are the most relevant. So maybe that's something like this. And those are the ones that you actually load into your sales grid. Those are what you say are the best competing properties, the ones that are most similar to the subject property, that are the ones that are most indicative of what the value of the subject property might be. And that's kind of the same thing here is you're doing that. You're removing those properties that even though, or those mathematical methods that even though they're legitimate, they're not necessarily the ones I want to place weight on. They're not the ones that are most relevant to the problem I'm trying to solve right here, which is getting the a reliable adjustment for GLA or lot size or whatever. So that's kind of how I think of this. And then it's up to you to kind of decide, how do I determine what really is a good adjustment to use? And that's another thing that comes up is you might say, well, yeah, I mean, I normally am going to say it's, let's say $70 a square foot. And so then am I just like, is it like a self-fulfilling prophecy where I'm going to get rid of all the ones? Let's just zoom in on this now. Got rid of all the outliers there. Am I just going to say, you know what? In fact, I could get rid of these too and say, call it $70 a square foot. And I mean, but I also could have equally done something very different and said, you know what? It's $85 a square foot. So, Brandon, how do I know which results to choose in here? And how do I know it's not just a self-fulfilling prophecy? Well, there's one real nice and easy way to verify that is what has worked in the past for you. And when I say worked for you in the past, I'm talking about in your actual sales grid. You can look at that both in the past and right now in your current sales grid. So if I'm thinking maybe $85 a square foot is the way to go, maybe I was wrong about this 70, all I have to do is go plug this number into my grid and see if my comps in general adjust closer together or further apart. If in general they adjust closer together, then this is probably the better result to go with. And I have really good data to support this. Now, personally, I would think that because I'm mostly relying on green dots in here, I do have a couple blue ones. I would think this might not be the best data to rely on because I'm really placing more weight on the green. Down here is where I had more of the blue. So I would lean towards this and then go verify this. So I would say, let's call it $70 a square foot. It kind of lines up with what my peers are doing, at least based on the median, what I've done in the past, and I have good competing data, especially paired sales, which I really like personally to support me in this. So this is probably what I would tend to do. And then I can go look at the comments and see, yeah, I developed the adjustment at $70 a square foot. The results I placed weight on range from 66 to 73, and here are the methods that I used. Now, of course, if this number works out well in my grid, if I go plug that $70 a square foot into my grid and my comps all adjust closer together, then that tells me that I probably did a good job and this is the right thing to rely on. If they get further apart, if my comps in general get further apart from each other, that's telling me I did not do the right thing here. Maybe I should move up to here or do something completely different. But that's a way for you to kind of back check what you're doing. Now, a couple other things I want to point out just while we're here is we do, as I said before, we do have an error score. I would consider that more than the R squared and more than the standard deviation or the mean absolute deviation is considered the error score. It takes more into consideration. You can actually have a very low R squared, but still have results that you should rely on. So I would not place too much weight on that. I do have a separate video about that I can link to below. But just regarding the error score, essentially the better the error score, that means you have a lower number. So lower number means a better error score. And the lower the error score, or the better the error score, the bigger the dot. So we make dots larger when they have better error scores. And I can see up here that I actually don't have a great error score in relation to over here with the neighborhood data for my competing properties. So this one that I did place a lot of weight on, it does have a worse error score than these two. But I still know that paired sales on competing properties is great to go with, as long as I have a decent number of pairs. And you can see when I hover over this dot, it tells me there were 301 matched pairs. So I'm good with that. This is the median of all 301 of those matched pairs, and I feel good about that. So I'm going to place weight on that, even though it has a worse error score. So the error score isn't up here to tell you like, oh, you absolutely need to call it towards where the bigger dots are lined up. It's just another thing for you to consider. That's all. It again, not something that you need to place a lot more weight on because it's bigger versus smaller. It's just another piece of information for you to analyze as you're going through and figuring things out in here. Okay, so now I want to get into what I think is the coolest or one of the coolest features in Synapse, which is modeling. And modeling is something you want to do when you're getting funky results. So like right here, remember when we were looking at half bath, I had these results that are crazy high, 40 grand for a half bath on a $350,000 house, or $100,000, $270,000 for a half bath on a $350,000 house. Those are obviously crazy results. So I have videos about this. I call it, what do you do when you get wonky results? Something like that. But essentially, I want to cover that in this video. So I have some crazy results. They might be really high. And look at this, like this swimming pool result, for example. It's $65,000 for a swimming pool in this market, where it probably should be somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. This is a funky result. Now that's okay. It's one of the green ones. I might just get rid of it as an outlier. But in the case of half bath, where almost all of my results, other than depreciated cost, are giving me crazy numbers, then I might want to figure out what's going on, or I might want to dig a little deeper. So that's where modeling comes in. Now, modeling is really powerful. But it's a really straightforward concept to understand. So I'm going to explain that right now. I'll also link to a video down below where I go into more detail on it. But essentially, when I click model right here, what that does is the moment I click it, it's going to adjust every property that I've uploaded, all of my competing properties and all of my neighborhood properties. It's going to adjust them to my subject property based on $70 a square foot for GLA, or if I click modeling on lot size, it's going to adjust all of those properties to my subject based on $3 a square foot for lot size. That's really all that's happening. It's what you're already doing in your grid anyways. But when you do that, so it's adjusting all those properties to the subject property based on the adjustment you chose, then it recalculates all of the math for all of the methods that are not locked. So the ones I chose here, as soon as I chose an adjustment, it marked it as done and it locked the calculations. That means if I model something, these results will not be updated. I considered these good. I feel good about these. So now I can go in and actually start modeling, and that will impact all the results of the ones that are not locked. And so you will see these numbers change. The dots on the screen will change. So let's go ahead and do it with that $70 a square foot for GLA. I'm going to click model. And now, again, it's adjusting everything, all those properties to my subject property based on $70 a square foot. So they now have a modified or adjusted sale price. And then based on that adjusted sale price, it's rerunning all of the math for everything on full bath and half bath and garage space and swimming pool. And so now I have this. And you can see, actually, I now have some group data and regression results showing up here as somewhat reasonable results. Now, I might think they're still a little bit high, but I am actually getting some more reasonable results now. Rather than just having like 40 grand, 100 grand, I have 7,800. I've got, and then higher, 13 and 8, 19. And then here, all the results change. I don't need to go through and point it out for all of them. But and now I actually have what I consider is a pretty good result here that works well in my grid. And I have support now from 2 methods in addition to my prior choices and peer choices, although peer choice is a bit higher than I would choose. But so I could do this. I can kind of remove those outliers, and I can say my adjustment for garage is going to be either 8 or 9 grand. Let's just call it 8 grand because I have depreciated costs at 7,600. I've got paired sales at 8,800. I'll just call it $8,000. I have good mathematical results for that. That's what I've been choosing in the past, and I've got peers at right around $10,000. I feel good about that, so I'm going to choose that. Now, full bath, I can see that I have a paired sale result, which looks pretty low to me. That seems way too low. I've got depreciated cost at 9,500, and I've got the survey method at $10,000. Now, I know you see some gobbledygook there on the screen when I hovered over this dot. That's because I was just doing this as a demo, but essentially, I can go into any of these features that I'm trying to get an adjustment for. And I don't have to just rely on the methods that Synapse is giving me. I can tell Synapse, hey, I did my own analysis and I can tell it what the name of that analysis is, and I can make notes for it, and it will show me that not only for this session, but for any other similar sessions. And again, I'm using the word similar, just like I used it when I was talking about when it's looking for prior choices you made on similar properties or prior choices that other appraisers made on similar properties. Then that's all considered similar, quote unquote similar. Survey method is the same. So the reason this is showing is because I previously, in another session, it was a similar session, meaning same zip code. However, I define quality and how far back in time to go in my settings. It's determined that I had this similar session where I noted a custom method that I called the survey method, and I can click this gear icon, and this is where I can see what I typed in previously. I typed in that it was a survey method. I typed in that the result of that survey was $10,000, and then I can have my notes down here. So I can say, I interviewed 6 realtors that commonly work in this market, and they all said that the um, the full bath adjustment is somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. The average was 10 or something like that, and that's what the result of my survey was. And then I have that, and now I have that method in here, and that will go into my commentary. It'll go into my work file, so I have support based on this custom method that I added in. And you just do that by clicking Add Your Own Method. So I can click Add Your Own Method, name it, give it a dollar amount, and type my notes, and it will add that in. And it will remember that for the future. If you're ever doing a similar property, it will remember you did that survey method. Okay, so I could model again and just see where things go. In fact, let's do it. Let's just go ahead and model lot size and see what happens here with the results. See if I get any better results here than what I had before. Things in general should tighten up and get better the more you model, as long as what you're modeling is accurate. So if I end up modeling something and that actually was the wrong adjustment, then my results will actually get worse, not better. Now you can see now that I've modeled lot size and GLA, actually my full bath results and my half bath results got much, much better. So now I can remove those. I can say, you know what, I feel good about $5,000 here. I have paired sales showing 4,900 and is $7,000, and then I've got depreciated cost at 5,000. I've got my prior choices and pure prior choices. I feel really good about this. I can lock that one in, consider it done, and then full bath the same. Get rid of the one outlier there, and maybe that one. And now I've got some paired sales results I can rely on that are at 10.4 and 10.2. I've got depreciated cost and survey method. So I feel really good about that $10,000 adjustment. I've got plenty of support. Now, I do want to point out that even if you only had one method that supported you, that's okay, because one method is what most appraisers use now, and that's perfectly acceptable to have only one method. So if only depreciated cost is working out well for you, then that's okay. You can just rely on depreciated cost. Now, obviously, if you have more methods lining up with what you are thinking and with what works in your grid, then that's obviously ideal. It's better to have more results than less. But again, you just may have a funky situation and you only have one method that supports you, and that's okay. All right, so now I've basically got everything but swimming pool. Now I can go do swimming pool, get rid of outliers, and repeat the same process, but I do want to show you something else with a little bit of time I have left. So I can add a feature. You do not have to just rely on the features that are here. I can add a feature, and I can add a property feature or a transactional feature. A transactional feature would be something like trying to get an adjustment for an REO property or a short sale, what that adjustment might be, or what seller financing, what that might be versus cash or conventional. And then a property feature is what you'd expect. It's any property feature. So I'm going to click that, and I can go in here and choose any other property feature I want to. Common areas. We have a fairly large list of different things you can get adjustment for right out of the box. Now, this is also based on the data I uploaded. There's other exterior features that Synapse is analyzing, but if not a single property that I uploaded had that exterior feature, then it will not show up here. Now you can see for tennis court, I only had one property that had a tennis court. So I know that if I'm trying to get an adjustment for tennis court, I am not going to get good results because that's basically there's one property that had a tennis court. That is not valuable for me. But I can look at guest house maybe or courtyard, Ramada, and sport court and see what I might get for those. So let's just go ahead and do Ramada. We've got 46 properties. Maybe that's enough to get some reliable results here. Okay, so now I have Ramada, and I can see that a lot of my results are lining up, especially for my competing properties, based on or right around the $6,000 to $8,000 range. My neighborhood is way higher, so I'm going to get rid of those, and I'm going to zoom in. Now I see that I chose in the past $16,000. This is just for a demo. It wasn't necessarily the right adjustment, but I would go and I would probably get rid of that really low one, and I might call it maybe even these two, six or seven, $8,000. I would, if I don't have a lot of confidence in this, I would probably go test that in my grid, make sure that making an $8,000 adjustment in this market for a Ramada is reasonable. That might be way too high, but either way, now I have mathematical support for my Ramada adjustment. Now, one more thing I want to show you is you can make your own custom feature that you want to get an adjustment for. This is a really powerful tool, really cool, and we actually had the idea from this from one of our customers. But basically, we can create a custom feature, and let's say I want to know what is the value of having just some kind of landscaping versus just strictly dirt, like no landscaping whatsoever. So I would name this feature dirt landscaping. You can see I've done this before for demos. And then I would go in here, and what this is this is a list of every field that my MLS allows me to export. And I can type in here dirt, and there, sure enough, there's a landscaping dirt back. So that's the backyard. Does it have dirt landscaping? So I pick that. It tells me, based on the data I uploaded, the choices that realtors made were either yes or they left it empty. So now, and Synapse tells you how to do this part. It says choose selection. Now, you don't have to do what it says, but I would recommend it. So I'm going to choose selection and then say, yes, that's the correct field and data type. Then it says, if a property has any option you select, that means it has dirt landscaping. So what do I need to select? Yes. So in the field, landscaping dirt back, if the realtor said yes, that means it has dirt landscaping. So I hit done. Now I'm good. Now I do want to add another field because there's also the front yard landscaping being dirt. So I'm going to click add another field. And by the way, you don't have to do this. I saw another appraiser just yesterday use this feature for just determining whether a property had a basement or not. So his MLS had a field called basement yes or no. And so he just chose that field, said yes, hit done, and that gave him the data. So let's go ahead and add in, whoops, typed it wrong. Dirt front. And by the way, this is just a search bar. You don't have to search if you don't want to. You can just scroll and find it. I'm going to choose selection like it tells me to. Choose yes again. Hit done. All right. So now it's saying that it has to say yes for dirt front and it has to say yes for dirt back or vice versa. I can also choose an or, but I'm going to choose and because it has to have both. Now it's telling me 55 of the 1,400 properties I've uploaded have only dirt landscaping, basically no landscaping at all. So I hit done, and now Synapse is going in and it's creating that feature and it's calculating all of the math for paired sales, for regression, for group data, for all that stuff. And I have my results here. And you can see, unfortunately, I only have one result. And if I go in here, I can see why. It's because I had actually turned off negatives. So I have negatives turned off for dirt landscaping. So it's not showing me that actually it's a negative to have dirt landscaping. Now I can just go quickly change that setting and it would show up in here. But essentially it's looking like my dirt landscaping in this particular market is somewhere between maybe 15 and 30 or $40,000 would be that adjustment. So anyways, that's that. Kind of cool. And I just want to show you that setting I'm talking about is the exclude results setting. So that's where you can go in and decide what to exclude and what not to exclude. And that will change what shows up here in this widget. So I would turn it off so that it will show negatives here. And I could see that then all these dots would show up on the widget here. Okay, so I think I kind of gave an overview of how this should be used. I do want to have a brief little summary here regarding weird results. So if you get weird results, like here where I got $104,000 and I didn't know why, or when I previously had only like I had no results showing up for half bath. If you get wonky results, it's typically one of three things going on. Either it's your transactional adjustments are wrong, your time adjustments is what I'm talking about specifically. So I would go in here, go to session settings, transactional settings, I would make sure this trend line for my 2 different data sets, or however many you uploaded, actually matches the data. If it doesn't, use this drop down to choose other options and find one that actually fits the data. It is possible Synapse will automatically choose one that doesn't work well, and that can result in wonky mathematical results. So that's one thing. The other is settings. So here, this is showing up wrong because of my settings. So I would go in here, I would go to my exclude results settings, and I would change it so negative results can show up. And the same thing with paired sales. So we have a lot of settings in here, paired sales settings. So you can actually go in and define to Synapse what you would consider in this market a paired sale, or how you want it to handle depreciated cost settings. You can modify that as well. Basically, you have full control over the data in here. And then the last thing, the third thing that has a really big impact on the results is modeling. So I would definitely encourage you, when you first get into Synapse, automatically go through, look at the results, see what makes sense, dial those in first. Once those are all dialed in with what makes sense, then start modeling, and the other ones should kind of fall into place and look a lot better, like you saw here with half bath and full bath. Once I modeled, I think, lot size and GLA, things looked much better here, and I had some really good results show up. And when I say really good, obviously, this is based on my knowledge of the market. I already understand this market, and also going and testing it in my grid to make sure it actually kind of works out well. So make sure you model when appropriate. And I would absolutely, so modeling has the biggest impact when you model the things that have the biggest contribution to value. So typically that's going to be land and GLA. Those two, in most markets, they have a lot of contribution to the value of the property. And so modeling those has the biggest impact on the rest of these. So typically the way I use Synapse is I load it up. I immediately look at paired sales for lot size and GLA. I'm not saying you have to do that, but it does tend to work well in my experience, in including talking to other appraisers in other markets, is look at paired sales for GLA right off the bat, especially looking at your competing properties, assuming you had a decent amount. So I do that. I kind of dial this in, get rid of outliers. Then I model, then I do that for all of the features that I have a lot of confidence in based on the results here and based on my knowledge of the market. Then once I've done that and locked in everything that looks good to me, then I start modeling, and then the results tend to fall into place on the other methods, which is what happened here. Okay, so that's that. Now, the last thing I want to cover is actually getting this into a report. So I have the ability to export, and what this means is I can export, and it's going to give me a bunch of PDF documentation, and some of that is helpful for me to load into the report. So I have options here where I can turn on and off different things that I want to export. I would leave the default settings for now. You can turn on matched pairs. What that means is when I turn on matched pairs, it allows me to get an actual PDF showing every single matched pair and what the result was from every individual matched pair. And it shows me the MLS number of the 2 properties that were matched up and why they were a matched pair. So you can turn that on. It does slow things down a lot because oftentimes there can be a lot of matched pairs, and so you get giant documents, really big PDF documents with a whole bunch of properties in it. So I would leave that off unless you actually need it. We will store all this, so if later on down the road you wanted to bring it up because somebody was calling you out or asking you a question, then you can turn it on and hit export and send all that information out. But so for now, I'm just going to go ahead and hit export, and I'm going to show you some of the documents that we provide. So let's go ahead, and the first one, the primary adjustment document. Now these first 3, the reason we broke these out and didn't just include them in the work file is because a lot of times appraisers want to attach these directly to their report. So I have this PDF. Let's just show you what that looks like. So that's this document here, kind of gives some information about the property, whether or not I handled transactional adjustments, how many properties were in each data set, my effective date, the date I analyzed it, and then it tells me the adjustments I chose and what methods I gave weight or consideration and what the low and the high is. So that's one document, and you can just attach this PDF to your report. We also have the commentary document, and that is this one. So it gives me all the commentary that as I showed before, that I can customize and load into my report. Again, I can either copy and paste this into my report, or I can just attach this PDF to my report. And then the last one that some appraisers include in their report is this method overview document. Now, this one is kind of, and I actually really like this one because it just gives a kind of a layman's explanation, 1 to 3 sentences about every single feature and what it means. So if someone ever called you, like they reviewed your report and they said, hey, do you actually know what Thiel-Sen regression is? You can have this right in your report, and it gives a brief layman's explanation of what Thiel-Sen regression is. So you can have confidence that like this is what's happening. Now you don't have to know, and there's no requirement in UsePap that you know all of the math behind least absolute deviation or Thiel-Sen regression or any of that. But just in general, that you know approximately how it works, and that the tool you're using, like if it's Synapse, is giving you credible results based on that. So, and to that point, I have a ton of videos, which I will link to the playlist of that below, that goes deep into the math behind every single mathematical method that Synapse is using. So if you do feel uncomfortable and you do want to go educate yourself on it, you can do that right inside of our YouTube channel. So I would encourage you to do that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is the work file. So here you get a work file, and it is extensive. Let me show you that. So this is the file that we got. There's method details. Now this one I do want to show you specifically, because this one is basically, it's very similar to that method overview document, but it gets really deep into the weeds. It references different books. In here, we use the Appraisal of Real Estate 14th edition and the Valuation by Comparison book. So, and then it talks deep into transactional features, why we handle these outside of property features or before property features, what order we handle them in, because the order affects it, how we handle property features, what modeling is, examples of modeling, so you can understand how it works, the different adjustment methods, allocation, group data, blah, blah, blah. It goes through everything, and it gives you results here, so you can kind of back it into it and understand how Synapse is actually working behind the scenes if you want to. Of course, you don't have to do that. It's just there for those of you that care about that. Now let's get that out of the way. Okay, so that's essentially it. That covers Synapse and broadly speaking what it does. Now there's a lot to it, so I would encourage you to check out our other videos. You can also give us a call, and you can go to synapse.spark4appraisers.com and start using it. We also have this help option right here. So whatever screen you're on, you click this question mark and it will take you directly to that section of our help or of our FAQ, and you can click on whatever's interesting to you. So if I want to understand how group data works and how to control it, I can click that. It takes me to it. It also has a link to a video that I can click on that specifically goes over group data and how you can manipulate it. You can also do a control F in here, and I can search for wonky, like what to do when you get a wonky result. And that's right here. And I click that, and here is that section. So what exactly does modeling do, and how can it help with wonky results? And I go into it, and of course there's a video where I go into details on what modeling is and how it can help. So I want to make sure that everybody's comfortable using the tool, that you feel confident in the results. Keep in mind that if you check out, I think this document, I think this will help a lot in just giving you a basic understanding of what in general is happening behind the scenes regarding each of the different methods. And if you do want to go deep, you can definitely do that in the work file in that method details PDF, or absolutely watch the videos that we have on all the different mathematical methods. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. Hope you like it.